Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're bringing a professional medical lens to a profoundly personal topic, the clinical mechanics of connection for adults with ADHD. We're going to step entirely away from the noise and look precisely at how ADHD wiring impacts relationships, communication, and social life. Because, well, if you or your partner have ADHD, you already know the friction is very real. But today, our goal is to establish a warm, authoritative, and clinical understanding of exactly why that friction happens in the first place, and more importantly, how to navigate it together.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. We'll start with the hunter in love, move into wiring versus character, unpack rejection-sensitive dysphoria and the hyper-focus cycle, and finally, wrap up with removing the shame. Part 1, the hunter in love. Right off the bat, as a foundational concept, we need to quickly talk about evolutionary mismatch. For about 288,000 years, our ancestors survived because their brains were wired for urgency, high-stakes threats, and constant movement. That hunter-gatherer hardware is sitting right in the DNA of someone with ADHD. But think about a modern, healthy, long-term relationship. It's emotionally subtle, it's slow, it relies heavily on repetitive, daily routines. It is arguably the hardest, most mismatched environment for this specific brain to navigate. Part 2, wiring versus character. With that evolutionary mismatch in mind, let's look at the actual daily friction points couples experience in their living rooms and kitchens. There's a massive divide between what we perceive as character flaws and what are actually biological mechanics. When you're the partner on the receiving end, these behaviors really do look like a lack of care. Forgetting chores looks like laziness, right? Interrupting looks like blatant disrespect. Sudden detachment just feels like a total loss of love. But clinically speaking, what you're actually experiencing is a working memory deficit, a microscopic thought retention window, and severe fluctuations in dopamine. It isn't character, it's wiring. Let's break down working memory. Think of it as a cognitive system with a very limited capacity for holding information temporarily. In an ADHD brain, it basically functions like a leaky bucket. Information goes in, but it drains out incredibly quickly. The brain drops threads, like, say, remembering to pick up the dry cleaning, because it only holds on to information that is biologically flagged as urgent or highly interesting. If the chore isn't an absolute crisis, it simply leaks right out. To show you how deeply this has absolutely nothing to do with capability or intelligence, let me share a story from Dr. Alan Walker. He's a psychiatrist who has treated ADHD for over 2 decades. His wife graduated 5th in her medical school class. She is a brilliant, highly capable woman. Yet, on Christmas morning in 2016, standing at an airport gate for a family vacation to Mexico, the gate agent looked at her and said, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but your passport's expired." They never took the trip. Why did that happen? Because remembering to renew a passport is administrative minutia. It just doesn't trigger the urgent, interest-based dopamine response her high-performing brain required to flag it as important.
Which brings us to a foundational rule we all need to remember. Organization is not a proxy for intelligence or love. When a partner with ADHD forgets an anniversary, a household chore, or a passport, it's the direct result of their specific neural wiring dropping an unflagged thread. Yes, it's a dropped ball, and yes, it causes real logistical headaches, but it is not a metric of their intelligence, and it is absolutely not a measure of their love or respect for you. Now let's talk about interrupting. The critical number here is 6. 6 seconds. That's approximately how long the ADHD working memory can hold on to a spontaneous thought. If someone with ADHD is listening to you and a related thought pops into their head, they instinctively know they have about a 6-second window before it permanently vanishes. So what do? They say it out loud, immediately. The biological driver isn't that they don't value your words, it's that they are desperately trying not to lose their own.
Part 3, rejection-sensitive dysphoria.
Now we need to introduce a heavy, often deeply hidden emotional load that significantly impacts these relationships. We call it rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. It's defined as an extreme emotional sensitivity, an actual physical pain triggered by the perception of being rejected or criticized by important people in their lives. Notice the word perception there. A minor constructive criticism from a spouse, a tone of voice that seems slightly off, or even just a delayed text message. It can literally feel like an intense physical punch to the nervous system. For them, the floor just completely drops out.
When this builds into relationship conflict, the mechanics happen incredibly fast. The ADHD nervous system is wired to process a perceived threat and react defensively long before the rational prefrontal cortex even has time to evaluate if the rejection was real.
Because the nervous system just can't tolerate this unresolved emotional load, it usually triggers one of two extremes, either a sudden, silent shutdown and complete conflict avoidance, or an immediate defensive escalation of tension.
Part 4. The hyper-focus cycle.
This cycle explains why attention and emotional intimacy can seem to fluctuate so drastically in these partnerships. Think of it as a biological pendulum. In step 1, something or someone captures the brain's interest, which results in a massive dopamine spike. This naturally leads to step 2, a hyperfocus window where a person can literally pour 14 straight hours of undivided, intense attention into their target. Early on in a relationship, a partner feels intensely chosen, but eventually, step 3 arrives. The fascination naturally normalizes and the energy fades. The partner suddenly feels inexplicably unchosen, operating on a cycle they can neither control nor predict.
But here is the crucial point to remember. The brain is seeking dopamine, not withdrawing love. This cycle of intense, magnetic presence followed by a frustrating absence is just a metabolic reality of a dopamine-starved brain trying to regulate itself. It's simply the engine searching for fuel. It is emphatically not a measure of your relationship's health or depth.
Part 5. Removing the shame.
Now that we've covered the mechanics, let's look at the prognosis and management phase. How do couples practically navigate this together? Consider these the doctor's orders. First, you absolutely must differentiate between wiring and character in your daily interactions. Second, utilize medical evaluation. Medication doesn't change who a person is, it stabilizes those dopamine levels so they actually have access to their own best intentions. Third, build external, collaborative structures, like shared calendars, because the ADHD brain simply won't provide internal structure on its own. And finally, stop the secondary damage of self-blame. Yes, the forgetting hurts, but the story the ADHD partner tells themselves that they are somehow broken or a bad partner, that hurts far, far more.
And this brings us to our core takeaway. The friction is real, the shame is optional. Look, we can't magically eliminate the friction of two differently wired brains sharing a life. But understanding the clinical biology completely stops the devastating secondary damage of shame. It's not the forgotten chores or the interruptions that break people up. It's the unaddressed shame and the misattributed blame that destroy relationships.
So what does this all mean? It leaves us with a final collaborative question to take with you. How do we build a life that fits both of us? Because once you remove the shame, you stop asking, why are you like this? And you start asking this question instead. It becomes you and your partner as a united front tackling the challenge of the environment together. I highly encourage couples dealing with these patterns to seek a professional clinical evaluation.